a hybrid, both remote and in person. We have 3 commissioners that are on the, that are dialing in remotely: Stan Pastujak, John Ketchum, and Alan Hall. And with that, we will open up the meeting. Oh, incidentally, if anyone does want to log in remotely that hasn't already, then the login information is available on the town website. If you go to the Conservation Commission tab and pull up the agenda for tonight's meeting, you'll have all the login information there. All right, first item that we have on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability for 039, Route 39, Orleans Road, map 63, parcel C3. Do we have a proponent for this?
Yes, David Clark here from Clark Engineering, also on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm
we can.
sorry.
Yep.
Okay, good. Also in attendance is Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax Design and Susan Ledoux from Eastwood Companies. I believe you're in receipt of the revised plan. Basically, it's an existing conditions plan showing the resource areas on the property, as well as a letter from Eastwood Companies clarifying what we're asking for from the commission, and that's strictly a determination of the wetland boundaries shown on the plan. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Amy, do you have any comments?
Correct. David, well, first of all, myself, Melissa, the assistant agent, Lynn Hamlin, and Teresa and Brittany from Blue Flax went out after the last meeting to put our heads together about the wetland delineation, both how the wetland kind of curves up as it goes on to the abutting property, which is the Burns property. The Burns has allowed everybody to go onto the property to look. So the northern part of that wetland does kind of bump in a little bit there, and also the wetland flag 3, we came to the conclusion that we would place the wetland flag kind of between where the 2 wetland professionals had flagged it, because that was the one there was most discrepancy. There was about a 15-foot discrepancy, and it was kind of hard to tell, because between soils and vegetation, it really could have been in either spot. So we agreed to kind of split the difference there and be comfortable with the wetland line being about 6.5 feet from where it is now. Now, your new plan, we were aware that you wouldn't be able to do a further revision of the plan in time for this meeting, so I do not have a copy of like a newer copy of a plan. My copy that I'm looking at, I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the right one, is 12422.
Mr. Clark, that's the most current one, is it? You might be on mute.
Is it labeled existing conditions plan?
Yes, it is.
It is.
That's the most recent plan.
Okay. So while out in the field, that we have an agreement that wetland flag 3 needs to be moved, and that the wetland on the abutting property goes farther to the northeast. Thus the buffer zones would then change in that part of the property. We'll need a copy. We will need that plan to have another further revision to it to indicate that. Just so we have an accurate existing conditions plan as it relates to flag 3, as well as how the wetland on the abutting property impacts the buffer zones on this property. But again, the wetland professionals are in agreement with that. So my recommendation, The issue is without having a plan, the commission has to issue a permit or a determination within 21 days. If we don't have, while we all agree of where the wetland line is in the field, if we don't have a plan that we can then marry to that determination within that 21 days, it becomes a little tricky for us in terms of, because we have a certain amount to issue a permit. So I'm hoping that you would be able, but you tell me what your timeline is for revising the plan to show the changes that I just mentioned.
When's your next hearing?
The next one's the 16th.
So you would need a plan by next Wednesday?
2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Well, but we need the plan by next Wednesday. We
1 week
could
in advance,
probably, we can be a little flexible. We like it Wednesday. We could probably do Thursday. We can talk about it but my recommendation would be to the commission is that we're ready to recommend approval for this with that plan. I'm recommending a positive 2A determination for the delineation pending that plan.
Yeah, I just wish I had known you wanted the plan updated. It's just gonna be difficult to get it done by next Wednesday. Given that we got 2 days of rain coming up. So I doubt we'll have something ready for next Wednesday.
Could you have it ready by next Thursday or Friday?
Most definitely by next Friday, yeah.
With the commission, it's our policy the week ahead of time, but considering circumstances that we're all in agreement with the line, I'm okay with accepting it on Friday.
Okay.
And that was a discussion at the last meeting that we needed to have an updated plan. And that after we went out to the site, so.
All right. Before we ask for comments from the commissioners, I'd ask if anybody else would like to make comments on this. Lynn? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say my comment for next hearing on the 16th, but I'm not going to be around. I just would ask, they're specifically asking for the confirmation, just the wetland line, and we are in agreement with the wetland line. So they're not asking for confirmation that there's no other resource area on the site. It's just the single question is being asked, so the single answer should be given, that there's still possibility of a vernal pool with vernal pool habitat that remains to be explored and determined. And that's all the comments I have.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, comments from the commissioners. Mark, do you have any comments?
I do. Given the circumstance, would it be appropriate to ask Amy to accept that plan, assuming we all are in agreement at this point? There's no dispute from the professionals, so it seems to me all that's lacking is the consensus of the board for them to move forward. Would it be appropriate for us to vote on that pending Amy's approval of the plan that comes in?
The only risk you run there is for some reason the plan does not come in within in a timely fashion. Then we run across an issue with issuance dates of permits.
Or can we set a cutoff date and ask the engineer to be able to accommodate that if he's comfortable with it? Perhaps it makes sense to expedite it.
Is there some urgency to this that anybody knows of?
No, I'm not suggesting urgency. I'm just suggesting it's an item that can be cleared up relatively simply. More for convenience than anything else.
I think just to be sure, because we could get it first on the agenda, it should be it should be a very easy thing. I'd just rather it come to you, just in case. But I understand your point.
That's fine.
We should be able to address it pretty quickly at the
Yes,
next meeting.
yep.
If it comes in as we expected that it would.
Yep.
No surprises on it. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I think I agree with Amy that it would be better for us to wait until we get the next plan. And therefore, I would recommend that we continue this hearing to February 16th.
Thank you. Brad?
No comments?
Comments? Wayne, any
No
comments?
comment.
John?
Yeah, I agree. Seems like it'd be better just to wait
Alrighty.
until the 16th.
All right, thank you. Alan?
No comment.
Stan?
Yes, I also agree with Amy. We shouldn't be making an exception. We should have the proper documentation in place before we do anything formally.
All right, thank you. The only question I would have is there's mention of vernal pools. Are they within the area that we're concerned about here? I mean, should we have those on the plan when it's submitted to us?
What the last time, you can't do a vernal pool study right now. A vernal pool study has to be done in the spring. So one of the conditions to put on, the determination is that we would require to have the wetland itself determined whether or not all or parts of it are vernal.
Okay.
So that would be part of the determination going, my recommendation to you.
And if there are found to be vernal, then we would need that also put onto this.
They would
Plan.
certify it, and you wouldn't necessarily, the vernal pool is not gonna be any bigger. It's gonna be potentially smaller than your wetlands here. So,
Is it within the wetlands that are delineated here?
yes,
Oh, okay, all right.
yes, it's not separate from.
And,
Can I just comment on that?
yes,
But you're just being asked to approve a wetland line. If there's a vernal pool there, they should come back to you so you can confirm the vernal pool boundary and the vernal pool habitat boundary. You shouldn't be rolling an unknown into a single request.
well, the reason I raised that is whether that would have an impact on our vote on this, or approval for it.
I think it's separate. You vote on this wetland line that's in front of you. We require that they do a vernal pool study this spring. And
And
if
then-
need be, come back to us for
For
approval of that.
subsequent approval
Yes.
of that. Okay, all right, fine. So with that, I'm comfortable, then we will push this off until the next meeting. Can I have a-
February 16th.
Can I have a motion on that, please?
Yeah, I will move that we continue the hearing on the request for determination of applicability for 0 Route 39-Orleans Road, map 63, parcel C3, until February 16th.
Thank you, Jim. Can we have a second, please? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye here, and roll call on the phone. John?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, the motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a amended order of conditions for 25 Bellbrook Lane, map 23, parcel X6, for the addition of a garage and relocation of the dwelling.
Good evening. Dan Croto from Moran Engineering. Here with the contractor, Harry Ellis. The owner of the property would like to amend the issued order of conditions to include a standalone garage. The only changes with the house is it moves 5 feet to the northeast, and that would allow for the best placement of the house, the raised septic, and the garage, and not crowding out the neighbor to the southwest. So it's all pretty much within the previously approved area of disturbance. The silt fence would get moved at also 5 feet to the northeast. And then the silt fence would, the work limit would move around the garage on the southwest to 12 feet around the garage, I believe it is. The only impacted areas of the new work is the 100-year floodplain. With the 100-foot setback to the wetland, there's no changes in that area. The only disturbance there was next to the east of the garage, of the house garage. East of that was clearing around that enough, so that was approved at the last meeting. So the only real changes, or the only changes asked for are this proposed garage, which is in the floodplain, which is behind the existing house, which will be removed. Fairly simple. There's no mitigation required because there's no disturbance within the 100-foot of the EDW.
Okay.
I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Thanks. Amy, any comments?
As Dan said, this is just within land subject to coastal storm flowage. The floodplain here is an AE 11. This is just an amendment for the proposed garage in an area that's already cleared or will be cleared as an approved limit of work. The elevation currently in that location is about a 10. So it's not much, it's not much below. The elevation of the garage would be at a 12, so it would be above the flood level. Not have any, as proposed, the project wouldn't have any greater impact to other adjacent resource areas or neighbors in the event of a 100-year flood. And they already, with the other project, we set the work limit line because they were doing a little tiny bit of clearing for the work limit line within the 100-foot buffer. You can see previously we approved the mitigation areas that are going to be allowed to renaturalize in the 100-foot buffer. So I'd recommend approval of the amendment with the previous conditions about roof runoff being the same as, which is dry wells, and no chemical treatment or fertilizers within our jurisdiction on the lot, including floodplain, but those were all part of the original order. Just wanted to remind.
Okay, good, thank you. Good. Comments, questions, Mark?
No remarks?
No questions.
Brad? No. Wayne, any
No.
questions? No comment. Wonderful. On the phone, John?
No comments or questions.
Alan?
No comment.
Stan?
No comment.
Alrighty, good. The only question I would have is the driveway. You'll have an extension of the driveway to the new garage, is that right? I assume that'll be the same material we approved previously, whatever it was.
Correct. I believe it's paved.
It's paved?
The current one's, the current driveway is paved. I think that was going to be a paved driveway, wasn't it?
So they're gonna repave it? And the new driveway will be paved as well?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what they were hoping for.
And we don't have any problem with that in the floodplain, Amy, right? For runoff and all? Okay, good. With that, can we have a motion, please?
Sure. I'll move that we approve the request for the amendment to the order of conditions for 25 Bellbrook Lane, map 23, parcel X6.
Thank you. Second?
Second?
All in favor? John, start on the phone.
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Brad? I'm an aye, so the motion passes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next item on the agenda is
For all that easy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
application for a notice of intent for 2 Miller's Toll Road, map 111, parcel K3-3. This is a project to raise and replace a single-family dwelling with a new structure with a new addition. So,
Hi, my name is Tom Stello from TS Land Surveying. Also, the applicant, Christopher Jong, is present. We are proposing to raise the existing dwelling and build a modular home. But in this situation, the existing poured concrete foundation will remain. A portion of the front part of the house, the foundation will be rebuilt since it's on concrete blocks, and there's another addition proposed adjacent to it. All of the work is proposed in an existing Cape Cod lawn area, and we are providing mitigation for the disturbance, increase in disturbance within the 50-foot buffer zone. We have been in correspondence with the agent, and she has suggested that type of native plants, and the applicant is in agreement with that. They just ask that the plantings don't occur in their view line and are planted to the left and right. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
all right, thank you very much. Amy, do you have comments?
The existing and proposed dwelling are largely within the 50 to 100 foot buffer zone of Cahoon Pond, which is right here, Old Exit 11. Cahoon Pond has an associated narrow bordering vegetated wetland landward of it, so you may measure the 100 foot from the edge of the bordering vegetated wetland. And what they're proposing is essentially a replacement in the same footprint, with the exception of currently the closest point of structure to the BVW, I believe, is 46 feet, and proposed is 44 to accommodate for some steps. That being said, you still have when you look at comparatively at your total square footage of coverage of hardscape in the entire buffer zone, it's actually a wash. It's a difference of 1 square feet. But because they are expanding a little bit in the 0 to 50 with those steps, recommended that they do show some mitigation. So what they are proposing is a line of native shrubs. I understand on the plan it shows it kind of right in the view area. We can note it in the conditions if the commission's favorable with that, to kind of locate it, split them kind of one on each side, still against the edge of native vegetation. The plants that we picked are appropriate for this site, being a little more shady and more pond edge, and the plants that were chosen are not going to grow any taller than the existing vegetation that you have out there. They're kind of mid-sized shrubs for the most part. We went out there again today, and I can pretty much tell you they're not going to be any taller than what you've already got there in your view area. But in this case, it's a modest, it's steps, it's 2 feet closer, willing to do a little bit of mitigation. Would recommend approval with the conditions about runoff from the roof going into either dry wells, or if it's too low, I think you'd be able to do dry wells, but if it is too low, you could do a drip line around the roof of the house with stone, and also the condition of no chemicals or fertilizers within the 100-foot buffer zone to the pond. So they formally did request the variance in their application for work in the 50.
Okay,
So.
all right, thank you. Questions from the commissioners? Mark?
No remarks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the applicant, if that's all right.
Sure.
And my question is, what is the purpose of the stairs that go into the 50-foot setback area?
I think the applicant's muted right now, but I think he's listening in. But their architectural plans were attached with the notice of intent. And there's actually 2 sliding doors, a double sliding door on each side of that face of the dwelling. And they're exploring right now to have the sliding doors removed and have that just have one giant, opening that they can open up in the summertime, just, cool off naturally. And they haven't, figured out if it's going to work exactly with the design structurally and all that. But that's why, the steps are proposed the way they are.
Okay. Are the steps necessary?
Yes, because there actually is a grade difference. So there's no regrading, but on that side of the house, it does slope downwards towards the pond. And when you come off that end of the house, you're going to need 4 or 5 steps to get down to the existing grade, because we're keeping the same type of foundation. The existing foundation is going to remain, and they're just going to work off of that elevation.
Okay. So it's not possible to exit from another side of the house?
I believe it's preferable to have that side. I mean, the applicant would have to explain more as far as what they want with their architectural designs. It is a modular home. I don't know if you have the architectural plans in front of you, but that's just something that they wanted to explore in that sense.
Well, the plans that were submitted with our package did not show those stairs. They showed the building,
Correct, but
but
it
they
shows
did not show
sliding
the
doors.
stairs.
Correct. The stairs are necessary because otherwise you step out and you fall down 3 feet.
But why do you need to step out on that side of the house?
That's part of the design, the architectural plans.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think what, Jim, you're saying is, I mean, we really rarely grant variances unless there is a demonstrated need or hardship, essentially.
Right.
My recommendation is I don't think what you're gonna do is gonna have harm, but, you have to demonstrate, to get a variance, it can be a little tricky, because you have to demonstrate there's no other feasible alternative, and that, stuff like that.
Thank you, Amy. That's
Like I said,
exactly.
hardship.
Thank you, Amy. That's
I'm sorry.
exactly what I was getting at. And to me, if it was a safety issue with regard to, potential fire exits or something like that from the house, I would be more in line to just, say, okay, it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Brad, questions?
Yeah, my only comment is similar to Jim's, and, for this case, I do not support a variance. To me, the design should allow to build this on the 50, and so it is a minor increase, but it is new structure in the 0 to 50, and I just think that these type of variances should be very uncommon, and they should be for a very specific purpose. And in this case, I don't know why the design couldn't jog things back a few feet to the 50. So I don't support a variance in this case.
All right, thank you. John, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with the previous comments. I don't think we should grant a variance. I don't think there should be any increase in coverage in the 0 to 50. And just looking at the plans and listening to the previous discussion, it seems to me that there's a variety of different ways the owner could solve that problem and reduce the footprint one way or another. There's no point in us trying to tell them, but I wouldn't be in favor of granting a variance, I guess is the bottom line.
All right, thank you, John. Stan?
No additional comments.
Alan?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. And I understand the concerns that the other commissioners have expressed. I guess I would suggest to you as well, when you're looking at the plans, understand this is a modular home. I don't know if the first-story bump out, basically with the deck above it, is also part of the modular design of this, or it's just the main structure. But that portion of the foundation, I understand you're going to be essentially redoing anyhow, taking out the cinder blocks which are on that end of the house and then pouring a new concrete foundation there. So I would assume we're talking 2 feet, which is not a whole lot of adjustment, I think, but I would prefer also to see that that you adjust the plans and try to eliminate that intrusion into the 60, the 50 rather.
Can I make a suggestion or ask a question real quick?
Sure, please.
Instead of adding structure, you said you have the drop there, which is why you want the stairs. Is there the possibility of bringing the grade up slightly there and not, which is just lawn, Cape Cod lawn area there right now? Could you bring the grade up instead of having the additional, so you could eliminate a step or two and not have that increase that we're seeing without?
Yeah, a few options. That could be an option. We could also, make less step area. There's a few things we could look at. I'd have to discuss it with the applicant, what he wants to do.
Yeah.
I think that might be a fairly easy.
I think it is. I think it's an easy fix. I think we have some options.
Okay.
Good. So, with respect to the changes then, it sounds like you want to come back with your redesign on this?
Yes, we would. We'd like to have a continuance to the next meeting.
Okay, which would be the 16th?
Which is the 16th, and we do appreciate revisions by the week before, which is the week from today.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. If you need another day, talk to me, but,
Good.
okay?
Sorry, Wayne.
Sounds good.
No, I didn't have any comment. Straightforward. All right, fine. That being the case, can we have a motion then to move this to the 16th?
Yeah, I will move that we continue the public hearing on the request for notice of intent for 2 Millers Toll Road, map 111, parcel K3-3, until February 16th.
Thank you, Jim. Can we have a second, please?
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Mark?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so we move this to the 16th. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2. And my understanding is they requested a continuance to February 16th.
Correct.
So can we have a motion to continue this to the 16th, please?
I will move that we continue the public hearing on the notice of intent for 20 Chase Road, map 4, parcel N2-2, until the meeting of February 16th.
Thank you. Can we have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
On the phone, John?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 1 Salt Meadow Lane, map 11, parcel C1. Again, I understand that we've had a request for continuance to the next meeting on February 16th. That's right, Amy?
Yes, and just so the commission knows, because it seems like we're continuing a lot till then, it's fine. We actually had no new applications come in for February 16th, so that's a new one on me.
Yeah.
Good.
What is
So it's
going
not a
on?
problem continuing these till February 16th.
All right, wonderful. Can we have a motion then?
Sure, I'll move that we continue the hearing on the notice of intent for 1 Salt Marsh Lane,
Salt Meadow?
excuse me, Salt Meadow Lane, map 11, parcel C1, until the meeting of February 16th.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. On the phone, John?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
And Alan?
Aye.
And here in the room, Mark?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Aye, and Brad, aye. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is order of conditions for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2, which was the relocation of the driveway, installation of a new shed and plantings.
I drafted the orders for you, so if you have any suggested edits, you know.
comments, changes?
None.
Okay, I looked at it, it looked fine to me as well. So can we have a motion to approve the order of conditions for 20 Chase Street, please?
Sure. I will move to approve the order of conditions for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2.
Can we have a second, please?
Second?
Thanks, Brad. On the phone, all in favor? John?
Aye.
Thank you. Stan?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And in the room here, Mark?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so the motion, the order of conditions are approved. Thank you. So that takes us into our discussion and with the revisions to the wetland protection bylaw that we discussed at the last meeting. There were a number of, not a number, but a few changes to it. Most of the discussion at the last meeting focused on the moratorium that we are proposing for the Herring River. And as a result of that, we've made some changes to that section in particular. We can start there if you like, and then we can just cover the other minor revisions that we have.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Amy.
Sorry. So for anybody who's watching or listening in, this is the changes to the Water Dependent Structures Bylaw, which is Chapter 304 of the Town of Harwich. The Wetland Protection Bylaw is Chapter 310 of the Town of Harwich, which the Commission has already voted, and I don't believe it's going to be a topic of much discussion tonight that's going to be put forward to the warrant. We can discuss it, it is here. But for right now, we're going to discuss the changes to Chapter 304. Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Yes. So the section 304 -4, which talks about restricted areas, we've added a paragraph that, and I might as well just read it so that it'll be in the record, states that there shall be a moratorium on the construction of a new private water-dependent structure on both sides of the Herring River to give the commission time to conduct a study or studies to determine if the construction of new private water-dependent structures along the Herring River will have quantitative adverse impacts on salt marsh, shellfish habitat, and we've added to that, and/or bank erosion. Such moratorium shall remain in effect in such time as the study or studies have been completed, presented to the commission. The commission has determined what, if any, regulatory changes are needed, and said changes shall be adopted and approved. In no event, so this is, I think, probably the most important language that we've added to this, and we say, in no event shall such moratorium continue for more than 5 years, is in the draft here, which is up for discussion this evening, I think, from the date the adoption and approval of the 2022 amendments to this Chapter 304 of the Code of the Town of Harwich. The area subject to this moratorium includes all contiguous parcels beginning at the northern boundary of map 28 parcel D1 on North Road, near the pedestrian bridge over the river, and extending southerly down the river to the southern boundary of 1 Belmont Road, map 1 parcel C1, at the mouth of the river where it opens up to Nantucket Sound. This moratorium does not apply to existing licensed structures or to the maintenance of existing licensed structures. That's the paragraph that that's garnered the predominant discussion that we had at the last meeting. And again, I think the changes for the most part are good. They're clarification changes, with the exception that we have added a timeline in here for the moratorium. The draft has 5 years, but I would like to ask commissioners for discussions and comments on that time period, whether they feel it's appropriate or whether they feel there should be some adjustments to that. Amy?
If I can go now.
Sure.
So just to back up a little bit, The reason for the time period on the moratorium is it was brought to our attention at the last meeting, which we had a very productive meeting last meeting, that we really should have a time frame for it. It can't be for infinitum. And it has to be for a specific purpose, which I agree with. I think it, if we're potentially telling people we can't do something, we have to be able to back that up. We did have a nice boat ride, which a couple of consultants were also present. Happy to share those photos. That's not a study. It was really just a viewing, which was extremely helpful. The purpose of the moratorium for a certain time frame would be able for the Conservation Commission to put together, with the help, hopefully, of other qualified professionals, parameters and an RFP for studies to be done on the river and these different resource areas in and around docks. In order to do that, it's going to take a couple of years between drafting what you want, having the study done, and ultimately, I was thinking about this too, a year study is good because you get all 4 seasons, but you want to start seeing how things might change over time too. You get a 1-year snapshot for a study might not be enough. A lot of times when we ask people to do studies for vegetation plantings and whatnot, we ask for 2 or 3 consecutive years. It's for monitoring and stuff like that. So my thought would be, and then after that is the presentation of the results, the discussion of the results, actions, things like that. So I think 5 is a good goal. I think it might be a little short, and potentially we can chat, but I think it's, potentially doable. It all depends on what results essentially do you want? Do you want a snapshot, or do you want a little bit more of a study done over time? I would encourage potentially a little bit longer than that to have actual scientific study done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me start off and see if there's any comments from the audience on these changes that we've just outlined. Anyone?
Well, I have a comment.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Mark Sangiolo, 9 Sketchaconnet Way. I don't think, first of all, 5 years, that's way too long. I can become a marine biologist in 5 years in that time. Way too long. Secondly, this whole thing is not based in any scientific data or evidence at all. You're completely going on hunches, on misconceptions. The experts have weighed in on this. The docks do not cause any disruption, any cumulative or any disruption in the resource out here in the Herring River. And why you're doing this, I don't really understand it. It seems like screw the rest of the residents on the river. It's really annoying. It's really awful what you're doing. And this is not going to stand. This is going to the town meeting, I guess, if you pass it. We're going to fight you tooth and nail. And why? I'm a very busy guy. Why do I have to put in the time and effort to try to fight this, the town of Harwich for no good reason? You don't have any good reason to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
May I? My name is John Hughes. I'm a friend of the Sangialos. Full disclosure, I live at 3 Hulse Point Road, Harwich Port, and just like to offer some observations on kind of the relative dangers posed to the wetlands upstream from the Route 28 bridge. What seems to be happening is there's a significant eutrophication that the biologist, who I think is submitted in evidence to you, due to runoff from phosphates from fertilizers and that kind of thing, which goes upstream in the flood tide. And that wetlands upstream from the Route 28 bridge is a significant rookery, which is a real jewel in the crown of what we have. And I see kayak there all the time, so I'm quite familiar with the area. And a second danger to that area, which I don't think is going to survive a 5-year time frame, is there's a significant silting in that I've seen. I've been paddling up there for, I don't know, since 2004 or so. And what's happening is the Route 28 bridge is acting like a dam. It's causing a significant silting. And if you're worried about kind of threats to the wetlands that you see in that estuarial marsh, I think that silting in and eutrophication is a far greater danger, at least in my opinion, than bridge pilings. And so the issue in my mind is if you kind of put off for 5 years, you know, looking at those threats to the wetlands in that region, because you think that pilings are going to be an issue, I think, you know, you're really looking at a significant threat to the ecology of a very important part of Harwich. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other comments?
I guess I better. Hi,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
Dave Hogan. I live on the Herring River, and my neighbor and I are really anxious to share a dock on the river. We're at 9 and 11 Herring Run. We do know we have some challenges with the depth of the water and the marsh and shellfish and all that, but we're willing to go ahead and try to come to some agreement with what we could do. As far as the last gentleman's comments and some of the reading that I've done from some of the experts locally, I would hope that whatever study you do would include his comments on, I forget the name, the eutrophication or something. So, would the study include that? Would the studies include that?
We haven't set the parameters for it yet, so it's definitely up for discussion.
Yeah, well,
I mean, our concern, I think, is the same as yours, that it's the overall health of the river in that particular stretch that we're concerned about. So there's a number of issues that are impacting that. This being just perhaps one of them, but obviously I think if we're going to be doing studies, it would be short-sighted just to limit it to the impact of docks and piers.
yes. Okay. And it would take 5 years to do that.
Well, yes, because, and Brad can probably speak to this best because he's been on that river for decades. So, I mean, he's seen the changes to it as well. And I don't know if you have any comments to that.
In terms of the duration of the study? Well, the eutrophication issue has been studied a fair amount by the University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth and the SMAS facility down there. So there is a fair amount of reporting already on the extent of eutrophication. So that would be a very excellent source to draw on for the study on the docks and piers. So that's a good starting point there. For me, I guess we'll discuss in a few minutes the structure of the study and how it might be, how we might solicit, proposals. And to me, that process takes some time. It's very important to me that it's an unbiased firm that takes on this study. And so I think it needs to go to bid. It has to have a process where the proposals are vetted. So for me, I think 5 years is a short time period. I would favor a longer time period to allow a 3-year study once things have been accepted, and then time after that to vet the results.
Well, I don't know if any of anyone from Coastal is on the call, or if anyone from Reuben and Rudman are on the call. I would hope that they would make some comments tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments?
Through the chair,
Yes.
it's Don Monroe, Coastal Engineering. I realize that there's some major issues that the commission wants to address, not only in the Herring River, but probably on properties along the Herring River, but I think the boat trip where we took photographs, and I think the commission took photographs, and I think it's pretty evident from what we saw, and I still contend that docks are the least of your concern. If it were okay with the commission, because I don't want to take up a lot of your time, I'd like to just put a couple of more photographs up, because I think last time we met, we put some photographs up, and some of the commissioners had questions about the angle and the direction of the photographs. But I think with the last week and a half, we've had a lot of our staff working on calculations in terms of scour around piles, also looked at orders of conditions and existing notices of intent were filed for the docks that exist that were governed by the current regulations. And I think that's a very important thing that we're overlooking, is that when a contention is made that a dock has an undulation associated with its location and then blaming it on the dock, when in fact your regulation points out that we need to be 80 feet from mean high water, then naturally we're going to select the area where the marsh is the narrowest along that shoreline for that particular piece of property. And there's evidence in aerial photographs as well as filed notices of intent with plans that also demonstrate that this is in fact the case, that your own regulation causes us to put these docks in those locations that now the commission is saying was caused by the dock in the first place. And I think that's a little bit ludicrous when you don't put on a bigger lens and take a look at the whole process of the applications for docks and look at the current regulations juxtaposed to that. It's very convenient to take a photograph and say, well, the dock caused that, when in fact, we've got evidence that there are crabs that are in the area that have caused the demise of salt marsh, not only in the town of Harwich, but in the town of Chatham, as well as other areas where there's a consistently large salt marsh for that hermit crab type of organism to live. Also, there's also evidence that there is not a detriment to shellfish habitat. I think in the boat trip, I think many of the members that were on the boat that took photographs would see, and I can share the photographs on the screen, that there are plenty of shellfish under most of the docks that we're talking about that are existing docks. As a matter of fact, taking a small look at the outer piles or the outer two pile bents, the circumference of those piles, a lot of them were not completely covered with shellfish, but were completely covered with barnacles, with moss, with all kinds of wildlife. And I think it's short-sighted to say that the piles are a detriment to shellfish habitat as well as salt marsh, when in fact, the surface area, doing small, quick rudimentary calculations, demonstrate that the surface area of those piles from mean high to mean low are actually creating shellfish habitat and organism habitat. So and I'm trying not to be upset through this, but it's ludicrous for us to think that a moratorium on docks is going to solve the Herring River problem, when in fact, the report of nitrogen loading that Brad referred to indicates that the river is relatively healthy. So there's something else going on other than docks, given the wealth of information that you can get just by going up the river. And if people have been there for decades, then how can they not see the shellfish that are hanging on the piles, the shellfish that are strewn around on the seafloor underneath the docks, and then notice that in calculating the flow of the river, that there really isn't any scour around the pilings themselves. And then the regulation itself points the design engineer to find the narrowest or the undulated area to place the dock to meet the 80-foot length and the 2.5-foot depth requirement. So the moratorium, while it might make sense, does not and will not. And the study for 5 years, like John pointed out, will only delay and make the process worse in the long run when the commission needs to do something now and it's not related to docks. It is not. And I've, as much as everybody has experience and people have been there for decades, we can go round and round and round about our credentials, but I think the evidence is plain just by going out and looking instead of spending 5 years and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a study that will come back and say the same thing we're saying today. Let's be a little bit more fruitful with our time and our money. Even though the commission doesn't want to talk about money, you're going to pay a lot of money for a study. I've seen many of these studies just come back and say the very thing that we as coastal engineers deal with and have been dealing with since the early 70s. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. Other comments?
Yes, hi, it's Mark Sangiolo again. I just want to point out that John Huth, who spoke before, he's a professor of physics at Harvard and he studies fluid flow. So what I would like to see happen here is to take this moratorium off the table that was ill-conceived, not based on science, just based on feelings. And let's do a study of the river. Yes, let's do a study because we want a healthy river. I don't think it's going to have anything to do with docks. I'd like to see some dredging in the proper places. That's the number one issue of the Herring River right now, not the docks. So if we can just, I don't know how to derail this train, because I know in government, when things start, it's very difficult to change anyone's mind. But I'd like to just see this, please, taken off the table. You want to do a study on the Herring River? I love for that to happen, but not moratorium and docks. I want to do a study on the real health of the Herring River. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a comment. Yes. If someone has their hand raised.
Yes. Hi, Michelle Hunton from Reuben and Redmond. I'm here on behalf of Ali and Oliver Cox, as well as Donna Nino, who own property along the Herring River. I just wanted to thank you for allowing us to comment again, and I appreciate that you took some of our prior comments into consideration regarding a time frame and regarding a study. I just wanted to kind of address your proposed changes. It is true that Massachusetts case law does require for a moratorium to have sort of a tailored time frame, and as part of that time frame, there has to be a purpose for the time frame, for example, to complete a study as you're suggesting. But before we get to that point of doing a study or a time frame, there's still a requirement for the commission in this instance to show a rational reason for a moratorium or evidence to justify the moratorium. And that's what I think we're all saying we haven't really seen here yet, because we haven't seen any real evidence from the commission that these newer docks, which is what we're talking about here, that the moratorium is going to affect, these newer docks are having any adverse impact on the resource areas. As we had stated in the letter that we sent, and I think it was raised at the hearing a couple of weeks ago, in the past years, the commission has had more stringent regulations, and the newer docks that were approved, such as the Thal dock at, I think it was 10 Chase Street, and the Turner dock on 18 Strandway, those were approved, and there were follow-up studies done to look at any effects on the salt marsh, et cetera, and none were found. And I believe the commission has some of those documents, and Mark Burgess is on the line. He might be able to refer to them more. But the point is, there were studies, follow-up studies done on some of these more recent docks, and there were no adverse impacts that were found. Another thing to point out is, as we said last time, we're very supportive of a lot of your proposed amendments, other amendments in the water dependent structures bylaw, including the increased spacing between the decking, the increased height, the increased water depth. And we think that the addition of even these more stringent regulations will help improve the design of the docks that much further going forward to lessen any potential adverse effects on the wetland resource areas. So not only were the recent docks that were approved in the last few years shown to have no adverse impact on these resource areas, but now the commission by your proposed amendments, which, as we said, we're very supportive of, are even making the requirements for the dock design more stringent, which will even increase the benefit to resource areas and ensure that there isn't any adverse effect. So this moratorium, in a way, sort of cuts against all you're doing to work to make the regulations more stringent to ensure that there's no adverse effect on resource areas, because you're not, allowing them to play out. And the reality is that, I believe there was discussed earlier that there's only probably a handful of docks that could potentially even, new docks that could potentially even be built going forward or applied for through notices of intent. And those, again, are newer docks that would be required to follow the more stringent regulations. And we don't think that those are the docks that are causing the concerns that you have. It seems that likely most of the docks, and again, we haven't really seen any real evidence, again, to justify the moratorium, but if there were evidence, I'm just making a broad assumption that it's probably a lot of the older docks that, weren't required to comply with a newer set of regulations, or docks that potentially were not built conforming to orders of conditions. And we think the commission just has other ways to address that, because as you know, you have enforcement, the ability to issue enforcement orders. You have the ability to specify certain conditions and the orders of conditions that are issued. For example, on these new docks, there can be required maintenance and required follow-up studies to ensure that there is no adverse effect on resource areas. So there's a lot of other means out there that the commission can use to address its concerns. Again, the more stringent regulations, and also just your enforcement powers and your ability to, add in conditions to have, ongoing maintenance requirements and studies done to ensure that these docks are in compliance. So we think that the moratorium is really too broad here. And again, and another point I wanted to make is the 5-year time frame is extreme. I mean, I read a lot of different cases on moratoriums, and at most they were 1.5 years or 2 years, and and we do think that is excessive. But again, it just goes back to the initial point. Even though you're proposing to do a study to find out, evidence and to figure out in more detail what's going on, before you even get to that point, the commission is required to show some actual evidence that there is a real concern, and with regard to new docks, because that's what the moratorium is affecting, and we haven't seen that yet. So thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes.
One more time.
Yeah.
I just like to reiterate that I think one of the issues that I see as most pressing that should be looked at is the effect of the silting in that's just to the north of the Route 28 bridge. I mean, that's really become fairly extreme in the last 2 years or so. And what happens is you have kind of a very broad wetland that gets funneled in right underneath that bridge, and that's getting silted in. And I think if there was one study that I would want to see happening in a short time frame, would actually be to see whether or not we could alleviate that silting in, because I think that's probably the single biggest threat to those wetlands up there. So if the commission is really going to be concerned about that estuary, that to me would be the one thing to really look at the most seriously at the moment. But that's my opinion. I look at fluid flow and think about these things a lot as I paddle up there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, other comments? Yes, sir. I see a hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Todd Turcotte from Coastal Engineering, and not to keep this longer than it needs to be at this point, but I'd like to, from an engineering standpoint, I understand the study. I understand the time to do the study. I agree with Michelle. I think that the evidence hasn't been presented that the commission should be providing to the community at this time. When an application comes in front of the commission, the engineer of record putting the application in front of the commission is required to show the performance, that they're meeting the performance standards. And those performance standards require us to provide engineering documentation that we've evaluated scour, which is an engineering calculation. And I will debate Mr. Commissioner Chase's assertion that those docks are causing that scour in that area, in that indentation. They're not. It is hydraulically not possible. And he has not shown any evidence backing that up other than a couple of pictures that don't actually show the proof of engineering hydraulics that will cause that scour. The boat ride showed that. We have pictures from that boat ride. It is what Dawn had mentioned earlier. It is very clear. Whenever a dock is proposed, it is pretty much proposed in the narrowest spot of salt marsh from high tide to the water depth, which is no salt marsh is a straight line along a property. So I asked the commission to come up with the evidence to show the docks that you have approved historically. Look at those plans. See where they were back when they were installed. See where they are today. Do your own evidence. You're requiring the residents that we represent tonight, the Coxes, the Aninos, and the 911 that is proposing to come in with a new application. We're having to do that effort on something that you're saying is causing the problem, and it's not. There's no evidence to show that. It's a feeling. It's a historical thought. We have evidence that we've tried to compile in a week and a half to show historically, if you look at photos from 1938 to the 1970s to now, that salt marsh has not significantly changed in any way. In fact, it's probably grown in many areas. And I think the commission is not doing their due diligence, but just putting a moratorium on something that is not actually having an adverse effect. And there's been no evidence to show that. And you're asking for 5 years for a study when in about a week and a half, we've compiled enough information that we're going to submit to the town a document that basically says there's no adverse effect and that there's actually an improvement to the habitat and the quality in these areas. So I think in Michelle's, to support Michelle in her position, 5 years is way more than what needed, and a moratorium doesn't change anything. You still need to provide the basic evidence that we're required on every permit to come in and show you and demonstrate that. And that is our job as professionals. So you already got us required to do that under the standards and the performance standards. And we do that every time. And it's an opinion. There's no evidence that the commission has ever presented that changes that. There's no engineering calculation other than a photo that doesn't necessarily demonstrate the crab infestation that we found when Brown University did a study from Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Cape Cod. It's very evident. And you have shellfish experts. You have experts in the field that this is what we're meant to do. We're providing that information for you. And we're trying to give you a better herring river habitat by still allowing the residents to use their properties to access the water. So I thank you for your time. I just think the commission needs to do more before they impose a moratorium.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the audience?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm on my computer. My laptop is not working right. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's Mark Burgess, Shorefront Consulting. So I was one of the others that was I wasn't on the boat ride. I was kayaking alongside the boat. And I just wanted to share my observations and then my opinion, of course, of this proposed moratorium. So I was paddling right along the shore, and in most cases closer than the boat, except when the boat went in for pictures. It got very close, which was nice. We were there right at low tide, and I was absolutely astounded by how many oysters there were. They were everywhere, and they were on some of the fiberglass piles. I couldn't believe it. And these weren't little ones. These are like 3 inches or more. I mean, certainly pickable. And they were everywhere between the Lower County Road Bridge and Route 28. As soon as we got to the other side of 28, it was like an entirely different planet. And I think that's because of the freshwater influx from the actual Herring River from the pond up above and from lack of proper flushing, which would prevent more salt water from getting up there in low tide. So all that's going to change the habitats for shellfish. Certainly docks can't be blamed for that. And I think that's enough of a observation that you can draw a conclusion from it. There were definitely some older docks on the river that have little to no marsh under them. And we can only hypothesize why, because none of that data has been gathered. We do, however, see that the new docks and the newer design docks have healthy marshes under them, that there's no erosion around the piles. And it proves that these new designs are working. And I've said it before, if there's other design challenges that we have to overcome, then that's up to us as designers to do that. However, for the town to act on any kind of a moratorium is putting the cart before the horse. I realize that you want to get data to then make a determination, but that's the way it's done. Scientists and engineers alike collect the data and then draw a conclusion. What the board is trying to do right now is draw a conclusion without any data and then perhaps spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the study done. What if the study is never funded? I mean, the town's going to have to pay for that. That money could go toward upwellers and all kinds of other things that would improve water quality instead of a study of some sort. And you don't know where that study is going to lead. But my point is that there is no evidence to support this decision at this time. And if you're doing all of this and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to prevent somewhere between 6 and maybe 12 docks, I really think the priorities are mismanaged here. So allow us as designers to overcome these challenges and prove to you, but to just out and out flat do a moratorium of any length is making a decision without any evidence. And it's not fair to everybody involved. And that's it for me right now, I guess. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Yep.
All right. Any comments from the commissioners? We've had a lot of additional information and thoughts with respect to this.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's Alan.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, gotcha.
I make a few comments. I'm a newly, I'm not elected, but a newly volunteered member on the Conservation Commission, and I wasn't part of this design for this draft of this article. And being a lifelong resident here in Harwich, I see this to be nothing but a complication. With all the information that's just been given to us by the neighbors and the people and the property owners that live along this Herring River, I find it that we should not have a moratorium, in my opinion. I think the standards that we have, the laws that we have, the design standards that are in place are sufficient. We have experts that have to come before us and give us the information to prove that what they're doing and is conforming to the laws of the local wetland and the town and state bylaws. I went to school in Harwich High School, and we had a teacher there called Mr. George Kurlichek, who taught oceanography for us in the 7th and 8th grade. And part of his classes was always talking about building reefs so that you can create habitats. They used to put a lot of reefs out in the ocean so that you build habitats so the fish come there and live, and all the other underwater sea animals. Everything goes to this man-made reef. And I look at the pilings as the same thing as a reef. I guess there was a nice boat ride and everybody saw the oysters and the shellfish along the Herring River. I don't see any detriment to what has been done in that river in my lifetime here, 50 years. And I've got photographs that go back in history of times, and I can show that there's not much difference. And We've had hurricanes of 38. You'll have hurricanes again in the future that will wipe out these piers, wipe out these things. Having a moratorium and putting a burden on the town and the residents, I don't think it's needed right now. That's just my opinion as a commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
Hey, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to let you know, after the commission has all their comments, Pamela Newbert has mentioned online that she would like to speak. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. Well, we can have, Pamela, if you'd like to speak now, you may.
Oh, thank you. This is Pam Newbert to the chair and to the commission. I submitted a letter today voicing similar concerns as Mark has already expressed here. I am not in favor of the moratorium because I think for the very same reasons that the science isn't there to support a moratorium, but more so, I think and I know that eutrophication is the problem in the Herring River, and the studies, there's lots of science that's been done that shows that eutrophication is a problem in our coastal estuaries. And if we can clean up that eutrophication in ways, there are many good ways. In the paper that I sent in today, in my letter that I sent today, I did some research and looked up some new literature that's as new as 2021 that has innovative ways to do very simple things like reach out to the public and produce graphics and information and setting up web apps to educate people about where pump out stations might be located, or make them aware that the habitat is a no discharge zone, that the money can be, that money and the revenue for people who have designed piers whose property values go up as a consequence of having their piers designed and permitted to meet the strictest of regulations and performance standards for not just the town, but for the state to minimize or avoid impact to natural resources. Their property values go up. The town gets more revenue from that, and that money can be put towards many new innovative tools that could help improve shellfish habitat or improve salt marsh habitat through the reduction of nutrients like nitrogen or phosphates, or reduce or even increase permeable surfaces going out further than just around the river. What the town is doing is good, but there's always room for improvement, and the habitat starts with the water quality. So even if you did put a moratorium on the piers, it's not going to solve the problem of having poor shellfish habitat, because we've got to get to the root, which I think in my scientific experience, and for the record, I have a PhD in marine science, and I've worked at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. It's the water quality that needs to be rehabilitated, and there's ways that it can be done, and I hope that some of that literature that I provided in my paper will help you. I just don't agree with the moratorium for a few remaining lots where you're not going to have the value added for the habitat preservation or restoration. The river's already built out essentially for docks and piers, so it's time we think about innovative ways instead of prohibition. It's time to think about new ways that we can make large improvements for the habitat through water quality changes. So that's my opinion, and thank you for the opportunity to express it here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let me ask any other comments. John, do you have any comments?
Sure. Yeah, I have a few comments. I'll try to keep it brief. And I appreciate all the points that all of you who are representing the interests of private property owners on the river have made here, and they've had some impact clearly on the Conservation Commission and the commissioners. However, to some extent, I feel like there's a little bit of a parallel universe thing going on here. For one thing, what I saw when I went out on the river, the same time that Mark Burgess and somebody from Coastal went out there, was a lot of degradation around most of the piers that are on the Herring River. To me, it was plain as day. And it's a little surprising to me that there's strong pushback against that. Now, I understand that part of what's going on there is that there are old piers built to older standards, but also part of what's going on there is property owners who don't abide by what they've been asked to do by the town. And it's been suggested that really the real solution here is more and better enforcement, but currently the town doesn't really have the resources to do any more than is already being done. And certainly the Conservation Department does its best and spends a lot of time to do that. But it's also clearly not solved the problem, and it's a resource constraint issue. So that's one point. The other point is the contention is being made by the advocates that newer technology and newer techniques of building piers are going to solve all these problems. And look, we've done it in one or two places, and it's clear that this is solving the problem. But I don't see that. I don't see, I do see that there's promise there, but I don't see there's clear evidence after a year or two that monopile designs and an extra foot or so is clearly going to remediate the degradation from many, many years of development along the river. I fully support the amendment to the 304 bylaw, and I support the idea of clearly it has to be time limited. I would go along with a 10-year time limit. I don't really think 5 years is enough time, and I think we need to get. I think we need to step back from this. I think we have to see what happens with the new designs. And I think we need time to clean up the existing problems that are along the Herring River. And we can argue all day about shellfish. And yes, I agree. There were stretches there where there were tons of big oysters on the rocks and on some of the pilings. And, you know, we've had many, many discussions about, you know, whether or not there's degradation of shellfish habitat, whether or not building a pier interferes with shellfish habitat, and I don't think we've solved that issue either. But it's more about the physical impacts of the piers as I see it. They're more clear to me, and that's my piece. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Stan, do you have any comments? Questions?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, I think John's had a lot of good thoughts there, and I agree pretty much with everything he said. One concern I've had in the past, and I've mentioned this in meetings when we've talked about docks, I do have a concern more about all the existing docks, as well as, you know, and because again, we're talking 6 to 12 new docks, but there's a lot of old ones out there that I see a big impact. I mean, I've seen at low tide, I've seen floats sitting on the river bottom because the depth isn't there anymore from when it was originally constructed. And I know I've mentioned that in the past, so we need to somehow in the future address those issues as well as we have to rebuild existing docks. My only other concern is by chance, you know, there's a lot of other things in this bylaw just besides the moratorium. There's a lot of the new construction standards that we're talking about. And my concern is if this were to get voted down, it's an all or nothing. So I have some concerns about that. I guess that's all I want to say at this point.
All right, thank you, Stan. Alan, we've heard from you. Mark, do you have any comments?
I do. From everything I've heard, there's a lot of different opinions. At the end of the day, river health is my biggest concern. What I'm hearing is a lot of banter over opinion versus fact. And to me, I'm not hearing enough significant fact to warrant the moratorium. I don't support that, and I think there's far too many questions that are unanswered to go forward with it. That's all I have to say for now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Jim, comments?
Okay, yeah, I have two concerns. One, I think, is to expand a little bit on what Stan was talking about with the fact that this moratorium is only one component of a whole series of amendments to our regulations. It seems to me from all the discussions that the remainder of the amendments that we're making have at least general support, or there doesn't seem to be major opposition to it. So I'm concerned that by dealing with this moratorium, we're going to basically sink the rest of the amendments that you have all worked so hard on to add into the regulations. My other concern has to do with the timing. And while I realize we would need a reasonable period of time in order to conduct a study, review the study, have public comment on the study, and determine whether or not it requires any action, and then proceed with that action. However, my concern goes to the point that I get concerned at a certain point in time whether or not it raises the argument that this moratorium is a regulatory taking. And that could subject the town to certain actions by some of the landowners. So while 5 years may not be the ideal amount, John has suggested 10 years. I am concerned about going all the way to 10 years. And those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Brad?
Well, I've got a few. I take it I'm not going to get an opportunity to present the PowerPoint that I provided?
We've had a couple of requests to put slides up, and I mean, we can show them.
Sorry, Brad, if I missed it. Was it your old one?
No, it was a specific request. Well, let's.
I'm so sorry.
Well, let's do this. That document, I think, should be part of the public record.
Sure.
And we won't worry about it tonight. I think it had a lot of points that could rebut some of the comments we've heard. Let me step back and just make a few comments. I don't want to take up too much time. First of all, in terms of our regulation, bylaws, and the Wetlands Protection Act, I think it's real important for commission members to realize that we are not supposed to have any impacts, degradations to salt marsh, or even salt marsh productivity from structures, water-dependent structures. So to me, for salt marsh, it's not even a question. When I go out to the docks between Route 28 and Lowell County Road, and you can see impacts with every structure in that area, be it shading or scouring. So to me, that's a very important point, that our regulations, the Wetlands Protection Act, should not be allowing those impacts to begin with. So that's salt marsh. In terms of shellfish, it's harder to show those impacts. It's not as clear. We've heard a lot of discussion on the abundance of shellfish. We've been talking about this point for 10 years, and I wish that we could get clear on this. Oysters do well with structure. Oysters will attach to any structure and do well. Oysters are not offended by water-dependent structures. So, you see that. You see them growing. They're doing fine. There's a tremendous set right now. But let's not call that shellfish as a blanket description of all species, because quahogs and soft-shell clams are impacted by the scouring effects of water-dependent structures. And I am a little bit surprised to hear from engineers who are dismissing any possible scouring impacts. Because this is a topic that's been discussed for decades. I came across the Coastal Zone Management Forum from 1988. They listed all the concerns about dock and piers. It's all the same concerns we have today, and they highlighted scouring as their primary concern. And so I'm really surprised to hear that just outright dismissed, because I'm seeing scouring impacts between 28 and Lowell County Road. And to me, here's the thing, you've got unhealthy marsh at these docks. So it's not scouring. What is it? I don't see a lot of crabs. I've been shell fishing for nearly 50 years in the Herring River, a little bit shy of 50 years. And so I've been out there a lot. I'm not seeing legions of crabs picking away at salt marsh. So I really think it's important to separate oysters from quahogs and soft shell clams. So those are my two major comments I wanted to make. I think that I would favor a 10-year period. If people have heartburn with that long period of time, then let's discuss, something shorter. I think 5 years is a very quick timeline. And again, I would like an opportunity at some point to discuss further my opinion on these impacts, which to me are clearly obvious at that stretch of the Herring River.
Thanks, Brad. Wayne, yes?
Yeah, I'd like to go on record as being opposed to this moratorium, 100% opposed to it. I don't know how in clear conscience we can sit here and deny these last property owners the right to utilize their property and build a dock when the rest of the people down there have already done it. It's just not right.
Okay. Good. Well, I think it's been a very insightful set of discussions we've had tonight. In listening to the comments, I'm somewhat frustrated by the ease with which some people say that they look at the new docks and they say, well, there's absolutely no adverse impacts whatsoever. Where I think anyone that was on that boat ride can probably confirm that some of those new structures that were put up in the last couple of years, we're already seeing that the salt marsh underneath them, whether from the construction or just from other factors, is being adversely impacted. We talk about the Turner dock on Strandway. I mean, that's really, it has very limited impact because it's such a small structure compared to some of the other ones that we've seen that span, tens of feet of salt marsh. The other issues that we've had, I understand the comments about eutrophication with the river. There was a study done recently by APCC that also looked at most of the water bodies in on the Cape, and embayments and estuaries and ponds, and they specifically called out the Herring River and said that they tested the water at the footbridge and also at Route 28, and their finding was that the water there is unacceptable and immediate restoration is required, is their recommendation for that. Now, does that have anything to do with water-dependent structures? Yes, no. Perhaps not, but our concern is that we need time to look at this. And for some reason, people just think that we ought to forget a moratorium and just give up the opportunity to do a study without adding to potential impacts on the river. 5 years is not that long a period of time, I don't think. And we can do an awful lot in that 5-year period. There's talk about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it won't cost that. And Amy's already confirmed to me that we have resources available to do this study. So that's not an issue in my mind. So it's a little frustrating, as I say. It's I understand people's positions on both sides of this. Nonetheless, we do have an article that is going to be on the town warrant. It already includes a moratorium. What we're talking about tonight is whether we want to limit that moratorium, and if so, what time frame might be appropriate for that. Jim makes some good points that, you know, do we run the risks if we leave the moratorium in there that we might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater and losing some of the other important changes that we've requested in this warrant article as well? So it's a tough decision, I think, that we have in front of us right here. I don't think there's any real win-win situation one way or the other on this, to be honest with you. So with that, Brad, yeah.
Can I just follow up on Jim's comment? Jim wasn't here. We had, to my count, 10 public hearings on this topic, and one of the moratorium was not taken lightly. We were really seeking to avoid impacts, reduce impacts, and we had the most concern for that part of the Herring River. We felt the moratorium wasn't warranted in Witchmere Harbor or Allen Harbor. We felt the impacts in those somewhat more quiet impoundments was less. So we sought to have a setback increase. So there'd be a greater setback between neighboring docks. Presently, they're allowed 65 feet, which to me is a very small amount of space between docks for both ecological concerns and navigation. But we couldn't come to an agreement on a setback increase. The agreement that was voted on was that we had our most concern for the Herring River. So if we were to go forward and not be successful with these regulations, I think we could revisit them. And what we would probably do is revisit the concept of a setback increase. So I'm comfortable moving forward myself, and if for some reason this fails at town meeting, then I think we come back. We have really good support, I think, near consensus for the other items, and so we add those other items and we tackle the setback issue. So I think Plan B is not terrible if in fact this were to fail at town meeting.
Brad, the only comment I would have with that is you're absolutely right. If it fails, we could go back and do it again. How long will that take?
Well, we've done a lot of homework on this.
I know, but how long has it been since these regulations were approved by the commission and are discussed with the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah.
You know, and being able to get on the warrant for town meeting with other competing things, you know, it may take a number of years before you could get back to town meeting on it.
Right. I agree. That's why I feel the study is so important, and I thank everybody that came up.
And I agree with you on that, Brad.
So I think that's really important, and I think, we're not hearing from a lot of the town that has access to the Herring River through boats, and they don't live on the river. And I completely agree with folks that live on the river, what they want. It makes a lot of sense to me, but we're not hearing from many town people that are concerned about the status of the Herring River. They've seen the changes, and so let's bring this to town meeting, and let's see what happens, and move forward, and let's do a really good study, and in 5 years regroup, and we'll have so much better information to work with. So I think it's a good path. I applaud the folks that came up with the study concept, and I really think that's what we'll do, and if it does fail, then it'll be revisited, and I think the setback will come into play. It's the one thing we didn't really resolve.
And I agree with you on that, Brad. I agree that we should proceed and go to town meeting. But I am very concerned about extending the 5-year period too long.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It's Stan. Yeah, I kind of agree with Brad, because I think some of the delays that we encountered for taking so long to get this to town meeting had to do with the last 2 years of, delays with the COVID. I mean, we were ready to go a year or two ago, if I remember right, that they were not even allowed to be put on the agenda. And I do agree with Brad. I don't think 5 years is enough. And basically, what we were talking about with Amy too. We do things, we talk about, we want to see the changes over time. And that's why I agree with Amy on that too, that 5 years would not be enough. Is it 10? I don't know, but maybe between 5 and 10. I'm not sure what the answer is, but 5, I agree with Brad on the short side of it.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Last call
Mr.
for-
Chairman,
Yes.
just can I make one last point, which my feeling is we should go ahead with this. I guess I'm repeating what Brad and also Jim said. I think we need to bring this to town meeting. We're talking about a public resource, and as Brad pointed out, the public hasn't really weighed in on this, and I don't think we should back off. I think we need to get input from the voters now, and you know, if it fails in town meeting, then we'll drop back and go to Plan B. I'm completely comfortable with that. And again, 5 years in my view is not enough. I would prefer to see 10 years, but somewhere in between, I'm willing to talk about.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the 5 years, in my mind, I would love to see 10 years too. Is that reasonable? I think it's probably asking a lot of the property owners on the river. But nonetheless, if we can do it in 5 years, then it seems to me that that's a reasonable time period. There is a provision in here, there's a sentence that says, in no event shall such moratorium continue for more than 5 years from the date of the adoption and approval of the amendments. I mean, we could modify that, and at the end of 5 years, determine whether or not there's additional information that would be beneficial to an extension for another year or two beyond that.
Yes.
And I would suggest we might want to do that. That way we can keep the 5-year period in here. We can use that as our target for the studies that we plan to make. And it will still give us some flexibility on it if absolutely necessary at the end of that time frame.
You just take out the phrase, "in no event shall,"
Yes.
because that leaves up for a little bit more potential for discussion at the end of those, as we near the end of those 5 years, about our findings and if we need more going forward.
Right. And
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
yeah.
If you do that though, then how do you extend that if you feel you need to go beyond the 5 years? I'd be more comfortable saying what you had in there no longer than the 10 years. And therefore it could be shorter than that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I mean, two things. One, I think the point of how do you make that determination is an important one, because in my view, that would mean revising the regulations and going through the process of revising the regulations at that point based on the information we found during the 5 years, which we can certainly do. There's no problem with that. It's just that it's a time period issue. The other thing that I get concerned about with extending, you know, as far as 10 years, is that this not only has to go through town meeting, it has to be approved by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. And that's where my issue about does it raise the arguments that could be made to the Attorney General about potentially being a regulatory taking. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it could, at 10 years, I think it leaves the door more open to that type of argument. And we all have to remember that, you know, and I probably shouldn't say this in public, but I will. This is an election year. The current Attorney General is running for governor. So that, in my mind, will at least delay an opinion as to whether or not these regulations pass muster with the Attorney General's office. And to sort of deal with the time period, there is nothing preventing us, once we make a determination that the commission approves these regulations, you know, with a 5-year time period, of going right ahead and starting work on the study prior to the approval of the regulations. Because the requirement for the regulations, for the study is not necessarily required by the regulations, it's just mentioned in the regulations. So we could start the process tomorrow, if we approve this tonight, of determining, developing the RFP to go out for consultants, determining where the funding is going to be available, and actually start the study before these regulations are even approved.
It potentially gets us an extra year of time.
It could get us a full extra year of time on the moratorium.
Yeah.
Regardless of the moratorium, I mean, the study should be done anyways.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, Amy.
Yeah. Yeah, and my concern, again, is just that we add to the issues. If the study finds that docks are a problem, then there's no point in adding to that while the study is taking place. So I think the moratorium is proper in this instance. So with that, there's one other item in here. Let me see, how would we do this? We have language in here that's before us that has a 5-year time period in it.
Yep.
So I would suggest that we vote on the existing language. Mark, go ahead.
I do have a point. If anything like this is going to be presented at the town meeting, to me, it would be extremely important that there was a strategy expressed with it as to what the resolve was going to be and how we're going to get there. There's no mention of funding. Where does the money come from? These questions are going to come up, and they're all very legitimate. And to pass that off because it's a conservation issue is not responsible. It's bigger than that. It's a much bigger picture. And I think everybody that sits here should be included in that conversation. Without the strategy, without some direction and some understanding of what's going to take place, anybody else that tunes into this conversation is going to be totally in the dark. And I think there's far too many questions to be answered. And I don't think we're doing the town justice if we don't get to that point to provide that information.
By the time of town meeting, those questions can be, I'm sure, will come up.
I fully expect so.
And I fully expect we're going to have some answers for them, too.
I would think.
Yeah. Yes, Amy?
Typically, the process, if whatever we go forward with tonight in terms of a motion, if there's a change, even if there's no change from what we originally approved, we have to go to the selectmen. I would anticipate I would like to do something on Channel 18, a presentation for what we're doing, trying to get the information out there for more people. Because regardless, that we want, as best as we can, for the public to be informed. So I completely agree with you there. In regards to the funding, it fits perfectly into our wetlands account, what we can use that money for, which there is plenty of. We can explain all that too, what that fund is for, how we would use that, things like that. We can further vet that in the future. But definitely no intention of trying to bring this to town meeting without, more public outreach.
Okay.
Well, I think it might be healthy to develop some public education in there as well.
Sure.
Like I said, there's just far too many questions. It's a very broad spectrum.
It is.
I agree. It's not an easy answer to any of this stuff,
No, it's
Mark.
not.
And taking a breath and taking some time to work through it, I think, is the right approach.
I agree.
So there's one other item in the proposal, in the warrant article, that is up for discussion, and that is we have a requirement in here that the floats are to be removed from the water by November 15th, and it's been suggested to remove that to December 1st.
Can you remind me what the start date on that is? Is it May 15 from now to November 15?
May 15th, and I'll go right ahead and, did you have something else, Amy?
No, I was going to suggest, I'm fine with the December 1st. To make it easier for everyone to wrap their heads around, I'd rather see like a May 1st to December 1st. Rather than like a May 15 to December 1st, just keep the dates the same.
I would support that, and the reason why I suggested December 1st, Ernie and I did present these changes to the Board of Selectmen a little while back, and that was one comment we got. They felt the October 15th end date was too restrictive for people that like to boat later in the season, and I agree with that. We discussed as a commission, we came up with November 15th, but as I thought about it further, I think it would probably serve the public better to give a little broader season. And so therefore, I suggested December 1st, and I agree with May 1st.
May 1st to December 1st.
So those are the revisions that we have. I think with the discussions that we've had also, that we're at a point now where we should take a vote on this.
If I can offer 2 more cents on the time period for the study, I think we've heard a fair amount of points that would point that 10 years may be too long. So I'm not going to object to that. I do think it'll be difficult to do it in 5. It's possible. I would recommend that we either keep the language as it is, or we add a single year, just from the practical standpoint of executing a study, assimilating a study, and then going forward. So I think that's probably where we are, is either keep the language or maybe add 1 year.
Well, as Jim's pointed out, we probably have done that, sort of informally. By the time all of this gets done, if we can start this relatively soon,
We get 6 months, yeah.
then, yeah, at least 6 months, if not more, so.
Okay. I think Stan, John also had comments favoring the 10 years, so I just wanted to make sure they were okay with that as well.
Yeah.
Well, can I make an alternate suggestion?
Sure.
Which is that instead of, I would not agree to the language as it's currently written. That is, the language that says, under no circumstances would the study continue for more than 5 years, or would the moratorium continue for more than 5 years? I suggest that if we want to put language like that in there, that time limit is beyond 5 years, and that an additional sentence is put in that says, at the end of 5 years, we will evaluate the progress of the study and determine whether we need to proceed for a few more years.
Amy had proposed taking out the language, John, that said that in no event shall it continue for more than 5 years. We were going to take that out so that the initial period would be 5 years, but it's be silent as opposed to whether or not an extension would be warranted. I mean, we can decide that at the conclusion of that time.
Can I comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The reason why everybody is pushing back on the moratorium.
Mr. Chairman, I asked a question which has not been answered. Can we at least get to this point, please?
I'm sorry, John. I thought I asked it. It was okay. My apologies.
What would that sentence read in that case? I don't think it's a complete sentence, even if you just take that out. What are you suggesting the language is?
Want me to say what I have here?
Yeah, please, Amy.
That a moratorium would continue for 5 years from the date of adoption and approval at the 2022 amendments, et cetera, as it reads here. So instead of in no event shall a moratorium continue, it would be a moratorium would continue for 5 years a moratorium would commence from 5 years from the date of adoption and approval.
Excuse me, Amy, you said the moratorium shall commence in 5 years?
Begin, I'm sorry.
Oh.
That's what I meant.
Okay, just a clarification.
A moratorium shall begin.
That's fine.
What? I'm sorry, I'm still unclear on this. Let me see if I can. You're saying such a moratorium shall continue for 5 years from the date the adoption and approval of the 2022 amendments to this chapter 304 of the Code of the Town of Harwich.
Yes.
And what are you suggesting happens if we get to the end of 5 years and we feel more time is required?
At the end of 5 years, the progress of the study would be evaluated and a decision made by the Conservation Commission. And, I mean, we'd have to see if, it would have to also be the town to decide if an extension to the moratorium is warranted.
Okay,
So we would have to go back to town meeting to request an extension.
That I don't know. I would err on the side of caution and say yes. I'm not an expert in that realm. Jim might have clarification.
yeah, two things. One, if we decide an extension on the moratorium is necessary, we're going to have to go through a amendment to the regulations, which will have to go through town meeting and the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
Now, the concern I have with the wording that you made, Amy, is that the original wording that's in here allows the moratorium to end upon the completion of the study, review and determination by the Conservation Commission of any additional action necessary. So that could be a shorter period than 5 years. So that's why
I'm fine with that too.
yeah, well, that's the way it was originally written.
Okay, sorry.
It was written so that it could end when the study was completed and we determined what action needed to be taken. But then there was the sort of deadline that it would not extend beyond the 5-year period. So I think we're taking out the no event going beyond 5 years.
Yes.
Sort of confuses that issue and makes and puts in the draft of the regulations two separate deadlines which may be conflicting and therefore it'd be difficult to interpret.
Trying to figure out how to
Now,
fix it.
there would be no, now, at the end of 5 years, when the moratorium ends, or when we get to year 4 and we realize we're not going to be there by 5 years, we can always begin a process of amending these regulations to extend that time period. And there would be nothing that would prohibit us from doing that.
Right.
The prior sentence
Okay.
outlines that pretty well.
So you comfortable with
Mr.
it?
Chair. May
Yes, go ahead.
it's Stan. My only concern is going back to what we discussed in the very beginning and Amy threw out, you know, that 5 years is probably going to eliminate the possibility of being able to have 2 or 3 years to actually see what's happening of what the study reveal, you know, is pointing out.
I think if we're proactive about it and start now, since we have the funding mechanism to do so, start the process now, I think you could get 2 or 3 years of study out of it and still be within your 5-year window.
Yeah.
It's gonna be tight depending on results, but we can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Amy, and as I had pointed out earlier, you know, the earliest these regulations are going to be approved and be effective is going to be the end of this coming summer, sort of August or September.
Yeah.
Due to this being an election year, it may take longer, and it may not be approved till the end of this calendar year. So if we're proactive, as Amy has recommended, we actually buy ourselves an extra year.
Yep. I would like some, I mean, if this is the, I guess I'd like a little bit more clarification on how you'd like that to read, to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah, I mean, Amy, my recommendation is to go back to the original wording that the chairman read when we began this discussion.
So I
So
believe
keep it
it was along the lines that such moratorium shall continue for 5 years from the date of the adoption and approval of the 2022 amendments to this Chapter 304 of the Code of the Town of Harwich.
Keep in no event, all that.
Leave that out. Leave out in no event, and it will start off, such moratorium shall
Continue.
Shall
Such
continue
moratorium shall-
for,
Okay.
Such,
for 5 years.
okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
In that, we still have the problem of having two ending dates. Because we have the ending date that basically states that, shall be effective until the study or studies have been completed, and the commission has a chance to make a determination if any additional regulatory changes are made.
Could you say, whichever is sooner, if you will, shall be, that such study will remain in effect till such time as the study or studies has been completed, presented to the commission has determined if any changes are needed, or 5 years, whichever is sooner.
That would solve that problem, yes.
So we conceivably, we could terminate it sooner if.
Conceivably, we
if the
could.
study.
Conceivably, we could, and that was
Yep.
the intent.
Yes.
Because if the study goes along real quickly, it shows exactly what we need to do, we determine to do it, and we get it done, whether it's design standards, revisions to the regulations, or whatever, and we get that done before 5 years, then the moratorium could end at that point.
Okay.
Doesn't your language, Jim, as it reads right now, allow that?
Yes, it does.
So I think we should keep the language as it is.
That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think it's.
You tell me.
I think it's covered, I think it's covered by that prior sentence.
Yeah, I think it is too, Brad. So that's why I would be in favor of just voting this with the language that the chairman read when we began this discussion.
Okay.
I agree. I feel that
So-
5 years is shy, but at the same time, I think let's not complicate things.
Okay.
Let's get busy on this and work on the study.
Right.
So we're leaving in the preceding sentence as it
Yeah.
reads now.
Right.
And with the changes to the subsequent sentence about the 5 years then.
Right. So, Brad, Ernie, we're going to vote it exactly the way you read it when we began the
Yeah.
discussion.
All right. You comfortable with that, Amy? I mean, do you have that?
I've got it.
Okay, good. And then the other changes to the November 15th date.
Right.
And then that is there anything else in here, Amy, that's you'd
There's-
like to bring up?
Nothing substantive. There was a couple of grammar issues and a spelling issue or two. Those we don't need to, I'll make sure those are all set, but nothing substantive. Those are the substantive items.
All right. So with that, can we have a motion?
Yes. I will move that we amend the draft of the Water Dependent Structure Bylaw, Chapter 30, Code of the Town of Harwich, with the amendments that have been discussed at tonight's meeting.
The only change I make to that is chapter 30 is chapter 304.
304.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. Can we have any discussion? Can we have a second, please?
Second.
All right, all in favor, starting with John.
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Alan?
Nay, no.
Mark?
Nay.
Jim?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
And I'm aye. So the motion passes 4-3, 5-2.
Five to
Sorry,
two.
5-2. All right.
Okay.
So the last thing we have on our, was there anything with respect to the changes to the wetland protection bylaw, Amy, that we need to discuss tonight?
Nope, that one's ready to go.
Okay, good, thank you.
Unless you want to bring anything up last minute.
I don't think so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Hi, it's Mark again. There was one other question that may not be solved tonight, of course, but I'd like to at least put a bug in the commission's ear, and that is the variance that we have to request every single time to get a dock. The one that says no new water dependent structure shall be sited in a non-designated shellfish area. So all of the areas left in town are designated shellfish areas. As far as I know, the only two that weren't, 3 were in Witchmere Harbor in the northeast corner, and all of those have approved structures. So moving forward, every single water dependent structure application will be applying for the variance. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this has been done like 15 times since 2003. So the reason the variance was granted was because applicants were able to demonstrate in one form or another that the project could be installed and not have significant adverse impacts to the resources, and therefore the variance was granted. What I'm suggesting is those performance standards are already in place. They're still in place. So why don't we make everybody's life easier and just get rid of that part of the bylaw? You still have total control over performance standards and design standards and everything else to achieve the goals of protecting the resource areas. The variance just creates a crap load of trouble for everybody. That would be my suggestion, would be just to delete that from the regulation and save everybody a lot of time and argument.
Yeah, in the interest of time, Mark, is because we are up against a deadline. I hear what you're saying, and I understand the frustration that we go through every time we have a new proposal for a dock that's in a shellfish area and we're asked to grant variances. It's not an easy discussion. I think the better answer would be to have standards for those shellfish surveys that we do, as opposed to just blanket, excluding any docks that are in a map shellfish area. So I don't think we want to raise that tonight. I think we're going to leave it like it is. Yeah, going forward though, I mean, it's something we can entertain, but again, the discussions that we've had center more on establishing the survey standards as opposed to eliminating the map shellfish habitat. Brad, you had a comment?
Yeah, just briefly, Mark, we did discuss this point of yours in detail at several public hearings, and the consensus was to not remove that language, but to find ways to improve performance standards on what does it mean to have significant shellfish habitat, how surveys should operate, and to look at redoing the shellfish classification that hasn't been changed for 20 years. So I think we agree with you that something needs to be done, but in the public hearings, we did not agree to remove that language. So I think we could take that up at a later date as something that needs to be clarified and improved.
I agree, Brad. I'm not saying it would be done tonight, obviously. There's been a lot of work done, and the reason why you only seem to have pushback on the moratorium is because I'm going to speak for everybody in the room and everything, but all of the work that we've been doing over the years has paid off, and that the new bylaws, all the other ones that are proposed, everybody's okay with. So we're heading in the right direction, and we get it, and that's why nobody's saying anything about any of the other changes you want to make to the water dependent structure bylaw, because we agree with them. They're fair. They're more of a standard in regards to other towns, and and I don't think the ones that oppose the moratorium just don't think that that's a fair way to address that problem. But everything else we'll figure out as we go forward. And I've been with you guys from the beginning, and I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, we'll expect to hear from you, Mark. All right. Good. Well, thank you, everyone, for the discussion again tonight. I appreciate it. I think it raised more interesting points. Obviously, we have work to do ahead of us now with the survey, but we will get started on that as quickly as we can. Good. So that closes
Mr.
that.
Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. This is Todd Turgot from Coastal. There was mention tonight from Commissioner Chase of a presentation that he had prepared. If that gets presented for the Board of Selectmen in the town, is that available to those that participated tonight, who are preparing our documentation? or is that going to be separate? Is that going to be something that's available to the public prior to the selectmen's hearing?
Sure, that's my fault, Todd. When I was putting together all the information for tonight, I'm so sorry, Brad, I didn't go back like a week from when you did it.
You're busy.
We can certainly include that, and maybe we just, I mean, going forward, we're gonna, like I said, between now and town meeting, have presentations and discussions further, so we will definitely let you know. I know everybody who's present here tonight, we can definitely make it available for you and for the public. That's my fault tonight that it wasn't queued up, so sorry about that.
No, no worries, Amy. There's a lot been going on in the past 2 weeks, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Once again, I think we'll close out that topic on the agenda then. And the next item we have is minutes from prior meetings.
Yep, we got 2 sets of minutes. Let's get rid of this old guy here, the Wednesday, September 4th, 2019 ones.
Amy, can you remind me why we deferred that from the last meeting?
We had to look at, forget which one was. Hold on one second.
Finding that in the Dropbox?
Yeah, I had that one. It's the last item in the Dropbox.
Oh, other people didn't have it in the Dropbox.
All the way down to the bottom.
Oh, that's right. That's what it was, is that some people didn't show up in Dropbox last time. That's why we didn't do that one.
Which one was that?
September 4th, 2019.
Yeah.
Is that the reason for that one? I'm looking through here. I don't see any of the controversial, well, I mean, Shady Drive was, but that wasn't, we didn't talk about it. I don't think we had any discussion on it. We put it on because I think some people couldn't locate it or it didn't show up on some people's Dropboxes last
Yeah,
night.
I don't think we did. I still had my copy of it, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know what transpired with that one. I don't think I had any comments on it, to be truthful with you. But
I don't have any comments either.
Yeah. That was,
For some reason, when people loaded Dropbox, for some people it showed up and for others it didn't, which was a weird
yeah.
glitch.
Because I only found 2 in Dropbox for tonight, Amy.
There is only 2. Again, we always, when we draft the agenda, we always
You put more?
put more,
Okay.
just in case we get to them.
All right.
When I say we, I mean Melissa.
Well, that being, didn't you get a new resource that was going to be working on these minutes?
Unfortunately, that person did not work out.
Oh.
But, so we are, Melissa's doing her best to catch us up. We're investigating like a little extra funding to potentially let her do a little bit of extra work out from home for them too, to catch us up. And I mean, actually, while I'm telling you, one of my proposals, I had to give a budget presentation today. Not to get too off topic, but it's on. I had to give a presentation of my budget for next year. I'm asking to add a part-time admin staff. Because for stuff like for minutes, for Melissa and I try to staff the office as much as we can, but our work is outside. We're not serving the public well. I feel I'm not doing as good a job as I could technically for you because of admin tasks. So I'll be looking for your support for a part-time admin staff, and they would help bring us, that would help us keep up to date with minutes too.
Okay. Be nice, we only had one set of each meeting to have to look at.
You will. We had a backlog, and Melissa found this grouping, like a few from 2019 that hadn't been approved too, so that's why we're doing this.
Well, that being said, I did look at the 2 of them, and I had no comments or changes to them.
Lovely.
Just excellent work on February 3rd. I mean, that's a lot going on that meeting.
It sure was, yeah.
Tremendous job.
She does very well, especially like the ones we know are contentious or gonna be, debated.
Yeah. I definitely have no comments for September 4th, 2019. Nine pages.
There was some long minutes, long meetings there, I guess.
11:20.
That was a long day.
Where'd those long meetings go? Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah, don't wish them back.
What, 2 hours isn't enough for you, Brad?
Oh, those were tough meetings.
I don't function after like 9:30.
In my basement,
Yeah.
that wasn't fun.
Nobody has anything on either set. You can vote on them together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody
Okay.
comfortable with them?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 4th, 2019, and February 3rd, 2021.
And we have a second, please?
Seconded.
All right, all in favor, starting with John?
Aye.
Stanley?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jim?
I abstain.
Abstain?
Yeah, I wasn't at those meetings.
Okay. Yeah, Brad? Yeah,
Aye, yep.
yeah, I was at 1, so I guess I would have to abstain, I think, of the 19th, but,
Actually, technically don't have to abstain from them.
Okay.
Because otherwise, sometimes, for some reason, for these really long time ago minutes, if you ever have a board where you don't have a quorum, technically you just approve them.
okay. So you can vote.
Then
Doesn't
I
have
say
to.
aye.
You don't have to.
All right, so those pass then.
I think February 3rd should be a good document to circulate with this discussion on,
Yeah.
the bylaw changes. There's just a lot of good discussion as
Yep.
to what the commission went through.
That's true, that was that meeting.
That was one of several.
I have a couple quick updates, real quick. Next, not tomorrow, but next Thursday, we're gonna be doing more invasive removal at the Bell's Neck Bogs, the olive and the willow that's starting to choke out some of the old bog areas, just promote native growth. So I have 10 AmeriCorps members coming.
Oh, wow.
If anybody else wants to come muck around, you're welcome to.
What date? What, next Thursday?
Next Thursday.
Yeah. What time is starting?
Starting at 8:30, gonna go to 4.
Wow.
Want to send a note out? to
I will,
everybody?
just letting you know, we're gonna be doing that. The Mass Association of Conservation Commissions Annual Conference is coming up, it's all virtual this year. I'll send you the notice. We have some money if you want to participate in anything. Instead of doing, they usually do a day at College of the Holy Cross. They're spreading it out, these webinars essentially throughout for like 2 weeks now, so it's kind of nice. I'll send it to you. We pay for you if you're interested in taking any classes.
Amy, what was the seminar that was a one-day thing that was held over in Hyannis one year?
That was either the One Cape Conference or
Cape Cod Water Resource.
one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
A lot of ones haven't, because of COVID, haven't been going off.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay.
That one was really good. I'll start working on draft language for an RFP for,
Wonderful. Good.
and because we can use, I mean, for the wetland fees, which we have plenty of money to do the study with, that fits right into what we can use those fees for. So it fits nicely.
Excellent.
And I'll work with our procurement person to make sure that when we disseminate it, it's done everything's done appropriately. You'll see it first anyways.
And we don't have to wait for that. We can do it as quickly as possible.
We don't have to wait, the money's there.
Yeah.
And studies don't need, you don't need a permit to do this study because it's considered exploratory and it's an exempt activity.
Okay, good.
Yeah. All right, that's what I got. Anybody else have anything?
Any further results on the proposals for the vine harvest at Bell's Neck?
I have told administration verbally and in writing that can commence. I immediately after that meeting said we can draft that, happy to help, blah, blah, blah. I've heard nothing.
Okay, maybe we could follow up on that because it's gonna be April before you know it.
Follow up on
So-
that, I will do that.
All right.
Follow up
Is
with,
that the time when you would harvest? Yeah.
Yeah, April's probably most appropriate, when you think, Wayne?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, if you're gonna use them, you've gotta get them in mid-April, May is the best time.
Yep. Also, follow up on Main Street bogs, any further information there?
So, I was told yesterday by administration that they are drafting a proposed intermunicipal agreement that this board would have to review and determine if that is what you want to use for that property.
I'm sorry, who is that? Is that being prepared by whom?
Administration. So there's been a little back and forth there, and I'd like to be a little bit more involved in that. There seems to be honest, there seems to be a few other, like, just discussions happening that I'm not always privy to.
Discussions around the viability of the project?
No, just about, what the proposal should say and what it's gonna encompass, and it is our land.
There's no
so-
pushback on it in general? then?
No, there's no pushback on it, but I wanna make sure it is your land, and we're not putting the cart before the horse. And we need, and your liaison, if you will, staff person needs to kind of know what direction people are going with this, because from what I understood, the superintendent, so I met with the superintendent, the current lessee, myself, and we had said we would draft a draft MOU, or an intermunicipal agreement. Administration wants to take a stab at it, that's fine. But then I don't want to say too much, there's potential other people also involved. And I had a conversation with administration yesterday saying that I think at this point, it's drafting of an intermunicipal agreement. It really needs to be the Conservation Commission, the town, and the tech, and not other parties at this point. I don't want to see, it seems to be going in circles, and we need to expedite this.
So it's underway?
It is underway.
One more thing about the depot bog. I spoke to the owner, the guy that owns the motor and the pump, who bought it originally.
Oh, yeah?
He still owns it. And I told him if he wants it, he needs to, I don't know, present documentation and showing that he owns it or not, or what, I don't know, just kind of a sticky wicket. I mean, if he still owns it and we go and sell it or something, yeah.
But why, if he owned it and he gave up the lease, if he left it there, is it considered?
Well, that's just the way he is.
And then is it considered surplus, at
I
this
don't
point?
know,
So,
I don't know that, but I
I'm
just.
not trying to get rid of something on somebody, but he should take it.
That's what I told him, so.
Is that Craig Williams?
No, Bob Cottrell.
Guy before?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
See, that's a long time.
yeah. So I don't know, how that all works out or whatever,
He
but.
has to it anymore.
Yeah,
So
I
he
don't know
owned
that,
it.
who knows?
So-
Apparently, he hasn't said anything back to me, and he hasn't notified any of you folks, so
Have you talked to Craig Williams? 'Cause I think he revamped that.
I don't know about that, but
I think
he didn't change the pump or the motor, I don't believe.
I don't believe so.
No. So Bob bought that back when he first took the lease on, gosh, a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Craig asked me if he could get it back, and he suggested that it was his, but I said, you've got to contact, folks
Show
in
us the
town."
paperwork.
We need to know,
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah,
we're
that's,
potentially gonna get
right,
rid of it.
exactly, that's why I bring it up.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I'll mention to Bob, he's a friend of mine, I'll mention it to him again. Maybe if he doesn't want it, he could send a letter to the commission or to you and saying, and he resolves himself of all the rights to it
Yeah,
or
we would
whatever.
have the right to sell it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be appropriate.
That
yeah,
would be good.
that way it'll cover us,
Yep,
out of the town.
yep.
Take a charitable deduction for it.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Yes, I'll follow up on those things.
Anything else, Amy? No.
Nope.
Okay, then, if there's nothing else, I'll make a motion
Chairman?
to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, John?
I just have a quick question with your indulgence for other commissioners, particularly those involved in the cranberry business, if you don't mind. I'm just wondering whether anybody can point me to historical information about cranberry bogs in general, but specifically the cranberry bog, which used to be in production on the north side of Skinnequit Pond. Like basic information, like when it went out of production.
Long time ago.
Long time ago.
Harwich Historical Society, have you tried to reach out to them?
Yeah, I have not, I will, that's my first thought as well, but I was hoping maybe someone else knew.
I've
But
never
if
seen
everyone in
any.
the room is saying it's before their time, then, okay, that's a clue.
There were trees there when I was a kid.
Oh, me too.
Yeah,
Covered with
forever.
brush and trees. I've never seen any vines on that bog. And not to say they weren't
That-
at one time, but
Is that the one next to Gorham Road?
No, it's south of 28, west of Uncle Vini's, and
Oh.
it has ditches that empty into Skinnequit Pond.
East of Uncle V.
There's a good website, John, the historical aerials that go back to 1938 and go forward. You may be able to see aerial photographs forward, then it will show the activity there.
yeah, that's
It's-
a good lead.
Is that, well, I'll look it up.
Yeah, NETR, historical aerials. Just Google that.
NETR?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. I'll
Yeah.
get that too.
Okay, thank you.
John, you can also, I think it's historicaerials.com.
Oh.
That's netter. You can Google historicaerials.com and it comes up also. It's pretty cool.
Okay, that's very helpful, thank you.
Yep.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Can we have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, John?
Aye.
All righty.
Aye.
And Alan? Alan?
Aye.
We are adjourned.